Greetings, Stoutlaws. Despite Chivalry 2 garnering a casual reputation, getting to grips with the mechanics and working out an intuitive control scheme took me some time. If you're looking to pick up this title next month when it launches on Steam, here's a quick guide to get started. In the game tab, there's not much to change other than making sure head bob is turned off. As for sensitivity, to find a good starting sense, do a spin test. When maxing out my mouse's horizontal movement from one side of the mat to the other, I can complete about one full rotation in game, which makes for a good reference point. My DPI is 800 and my sense in game is 1.1. Annoyingly, you can't type in a number. Keep in mind, like all other melee games, dialing up your sense won't make you swing faster because there's a sensitivity turn cap for attacking and blocking. In fact, you're probably better off playing with a lower sense so that the turn cap restriction isn't too jarring when it kicks in during combat and your normal tracking will be smoother. For video settings, make sure your frame rate cap at least matches your monitor refresh rate. My graphics are on the highest besides motion blur, which you'll want to turn off. If you have an RTX graphics card, I'd recommend using DX12 alongside NVIDIA DLSS set on performance to push out frames without noticeably compromising your graphics. If you have an older card, you'll probably need to reduce these settings where you see fit to prioritize frame rate. Next we get to controls. My recommendations here will work for any mouse that has at least 2 thumb buttons. If you have any extra thumb or DPI buttons across your mouse, this would be advantageous as there's so many different binds it's a struggle to fit them all. If your mouse has no thumb buttons, then you'll want to use the default flip attack side scheme, which in Civ 2 is called alt attack, but I find this style inferior as it requires 2 inputs for a single action. Right horizontal, called slash in game, is on thumb mouse button, the back one, and left horizontal alt slash is on thumb mouse button 2, the top one. Left overhead, called alt overhead, is on left click, and my right overhead, called overhead, is on mouse wheel down. Left stab, which is alt stab in game, is on scroll up. The logic here is to keep each swing type close to each other, both horizontals on the thumb keys, both overheads on top of the mouse, and I went with alt stab on scroll wheel up rather than normal stab just to stand out. Although the counter mechanic doesn't require specific directions, having access to both left and right attacks is important because you can morph same type attacks, which Civ 2 calls feinting. For example, you can morph an overhead into another overhead. Overheads deal slightly more damage, so having one on left click makes sense as you're most likely going to be using left click a lot for either high level punishing or perhaps brainless spamming. Right click is for block and also feint, which Civ 2 confusingly labels as cancel attack. If you are a Q feinter from Civ 1 or Mordhau, you should trust my plan and make the R&B switch for Civ 2, seeing as traditional feinting or attack cancelling isn't too relevant in this title, and right click to cancel saves a precious keybind. Put hold attack on left mouse. The final input I have on the mouse is flourish on middle mouse button. Arguably having the other stab here would make more sense, so you can stab morph into stab more easily, but I'm addicted to flourishing. On to the keyboard. Set up your movement controls as you see fit. I have rather unorthodox sprinting, crouching, jumping binds, so don't feel like you have to copy those. Kick or shove in game is on alt, jab is on Q, and special is on F. You can again rearrange these if you prefer kicking on F, but I'm used to this for my Mordhau controls, so I've kept it the same here. Whichever arrangement you decide, you're going to want to combine shove and tackle onto one bind with special and sprint attack on the other. Use is on E and throw is on R. I have my inventory laid out like this. 1 to 3 are weapons and 4 is used frequently to bandage. 5 is your special ability. The bottom row of my keyboard is taken up by all the voice emotes. If you want to use V here like I did, make sure you unbind it from push to talk, which doesn't even work. I also have B as arrow cam, which can make for some cool moments. Now I've used up every single standard bind that is within reach, but I'm still missing my other stab as I previously mentioned, so I just slapped it onto G. If you have a spare button on your mouse, you can move it there instead. Let's get on to combat. The first thing you want to get accustomed to is the core system of blocking, attacking, and kicking. When you block an attack, it's now your turn to swing, and when your opponent blocks your attack, you need to get ready to block theirs again. You can break up this rhythm by throwing in a kick. If your opponent is still blocking when the kick lands, they'll be stunned for a short duration, allowing you to get a quick hit in. Try not to use kicks too often because a skilled player can read these and punish. Occasionally, you can try walking aggressively forwards as if you're about to kick, but instead go for a special attack, which will often catch your opponent off guard in a most devastating manner. Heavy attacks are charged by holding down the swing bind, or LMB if you're inputting a scroll wheel attack, and these deal more damage but with a much slower wind up, meaning they should be used with caution. When you're comfortable with these basics, try to counter your opponent, which is a more forgiving version of the chamber mechanic from Mordhau. Whilst blocking, input an attack which matches the incoming attack type slightly before it connects, for example overhead into overhead, stab into stab. The direction here is irrelevant, and if successful you'll be granted stamina, which is always useful, and also active parry, which helps when outnumbered. Watch out for morphs, now called feints, which can trip you up, although if you initially counter with the wrong swing or timing, you can correct yourself by morphing your counter. Seems a bit broken that you can correct yourself like this, but that's Torn Banner banger for you. If you notice your opponent is using counters, start throwing in some morphs of your own and even combining them with heavy attacks. Dragging rears its ugly head again, which you can use to make your opponent waste stamina from holding block too long, or to throw off the timing of a counter. The bash mechanic is similar to Mordhau's kick in that you can use it to quickly take initiative if your opponent is being too slow, and annoyingly you can also land a jab immediately after taking damage. I have started to coach Civ 2, it's pretty scuffed because there's no private servers, but if you want me to show you the ropes firsthand, check out the Metafy links below.